What were the most important fantasy football takeaways from Week 8 Sunday action, including the 3 touchdown games from Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara? It's time to break it down right here, right now, as we begin another edition and another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. We finally got that big, explosive week in fantasy football with a lot of people going off for big games. High-scoring week. That's what we've been looking for all season long. Our performers doing what they're supposed to do in most cases. There was still a lot of disappointment out there. Let's not kid ourselves. There's always something that underwhelmed for us in fantasy football, but the stars came out to shine. Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, A.J. Brown, Tony Pollard, all 3 touchdown games. And don't forget about Derek the Hammer Henry just throwing down on the Texans again with another 200-yard rushing performance and 2 TDs against that team. He owns that team. So big week if you had any of those players. They're just awesome to see that, and just the scoring was up. Great week overall for some of those real top running backs. And don't forget about Donta Foreman as well going off here against the Falcons. Big game filling in with no Chuba Hubbard in that game. So a lot of good stuff there with the performances, and the matchups are starting to come to light here. We know what the best matchups are, and we know where the most talented players are and being positioned to succeed. And that's what we're going to break down here for you on Locked On Fantasy Football. We're going to break down those big performances, what we can learn from those. We'll do that first. Then we'll start to look at the surprise performances here as well. And then a lot of disappointment. We'll get into that in our next segment. We'll save the negative there for our second segment. And then not too bad on the injury front. We'll get to that here as well, breaking down the injuries you need to know coming out of the week. And just really one concern there going forward. But otherwise, we're pretty good here. So all around a very good week in fantasy football. We'll dive into that in a moment. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. All right, let's get right in here to these performances. So Christian McCaffrey, he pulled a LaDainian Tomlinson. That's what we're going to call it. Walter Payton has done it before. David Patton has done it before among the notables there. Those are the guys since the merger we've seen get it done here. Christian McCaffrey, 27 touches. That includes a touchdown pass he threw to Brandon Ayuk, 193 yards, and those touchdowns there with the ground, the air, and his arm all delivering here. So what a performance for Christian McCaffrey. This is what we wanted. We wanted the 49ers anointing him as LaDainian Tomlinson type god in their offense, and that's what he looked like here. What a performance. And the Rams defense is pretty tough on running backs overall. They're decent against stopping the run. They're good at covering them, but not when you have McCaffrey. The special talent, he just seemed re-energized, playing for a team that he knows can have some big things ahead. Even though the 49ers are only 2 games ahead of the Panthers in the standings, we know the 49ers have bigger plans ahead with Christian McCaffrey. So he looked like a natural fit, fully immersed in the playbook. Only took him 1 week to get there with what he needed to do. And just amazing going forward. This guy, I mean, he's looked like a great pick here. We were worried about the injury issues, but we got this extra bonus here of him not only staying healthy, but moving to a high upside offense here where he's still going to get the usage. And we saw that. We were worried about his volume maybe not being high, but the big thing that helped there was no Deebo Samuel, and we'll see if Deebo returns after this Week 9 bye. So unfortunately, you will not have the 49ers offense at your disposal. It's red hot here in Week 9. So Deebo should return. That might cut into the CMC touches a little bit, but again, he was dominating the backfield. This team, again, I thought the biggest thing was going to happen with the 49ers. They're just going to get more yards, more points, more opportunities for everybody, and that's what we saw here. So I think Deebo will be worked in the mix. We saw George Kittle score a touchdown. We had Brandon Ayuk. So our principals came through. If you streamed One, Jimmy Garoppolo, you're fine again. So he's getting it done with all these weapons, facilitating. So great stuff here. Trent Williams back in the fold. So this offense, I think Debo just takes it to another level, and they have a few more points, a few more yards, a few more opportunities for scoring here, and then Debo can really get open. What you saw with McCaffrey, he drew so much attention that George Kittle got open, Brandon Ayuk got open. They could do the traditional running game. There are so many things the 49ers could do with that offense, and once they got rolling, it was over for the Rams. Forget it. So awesome offense, awesome day by Christian McCaffrey. Alvin Kamara, how about him? Throwing it back the clock here. An interesting nugget that we read before the game is that the reason Andy Dalton remained the starter because he knows how to feed Alvin Kamara. And Jameis Winston, he's not a check down quarterback. He doesn't put the ball in the hands of the running back. Andy Dalton did that. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. He was a solid streamer because he threw them both to Kamara, who did all the work for him there with shooting past the defenders of the Raiders, who were just overmatched. Kamara was at lightning speed, where these guys were in slow motion. So Alvin Kamara, he got also 27 touches when you add them all up. 3 touchdowns, 2 receiving, 1 rushing there. Great touchdowns all to watch here in the highlight film. 158 yards from scrimmage for Kamara. So McCaffrey, Kamara, these were the guys. Remember a couple of years ago, we debated, even just last year before the Jonathan Taylor breakout here, who's going to be the first pick between CMC Kamara. Well, now they've come back with a vengeance, fully healthy, immersed as centerpiece of their offenses here. So that's great to see with these guys. One formerly in the NFC South, one still in the NFC South. We'll see if Kamara gets traded. But now the Saints are suddenly right back in the NFC South mix. He's their best player. No Michael Thomas, no Jarvis Landry. He needs to play off Chris Olave a little bit more. So Kamara, good position here for sure to continue his domination for the Saints as long as Dalton is starting. It's great news for him overall. Tony Pollard, welcome to the 3 touchdown club, Tony Pollard. 14 carries, 131 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's also involved in the passing game, but this dude, every time he gets the opportunities when Ezekiel Elliott is not touching the ball, he only played a little bit more than half the snaps in this game. It doesn't matter. The reason he plays only half the snaps is because it seems like he gets more out of each snap. And that's one thing we have to know about snap counts. They're going to be less if you do something with them more. And that's something we look at here for sure. Tony Pollard, only 14 touches, 131 yards. This guy is just like that dart. You just put him in there. He just runs and goes nuts. I think it helps that the passing game is so dangerous. Dak Prescott got involved in the running game. Ezekiel Elliott is always there because you need a little bit of power and the change of pace, which makes Pollard more effective. They're not going to wear down Pollard. He's best with those fresh, explosive legs, and it's good for fantasy. So, again, we'll see after this bye here in Week 9 for the Cowboys. What do they do there with this backfield? Again, don't expect Pollard to be featured because that limits his effectiveness, and you don't want him to get hurt here. Ezekiel Elliott can take that little bit of pounding. We'll see if he can return from that knee injury after Week 9. But Tony Pollard is locked in here as at least a flex and an RB2. Even if Ezekiel Elliott is there, he shoots up to RB1 without Ezekiel Elliott to steal any touches. We heard about the hot hand in that same game with the Bears. They've been kind of going hot hand committee with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. We saw Montgomery have a good game there with the touchdown late against the Patriots. Herbert also looked pretty good, but Herbert just looked fantastic. He's kind of the Tony Pollard of this. David Montgomery is like the plodding Ezekiel Elliott type, and he's okay. Gets the yards that are there with the run blocking and can finish drives. But Herbert is the guy, boom, he goes and doesn't need a lot of touches. 16 carries there, 99 yards and a touchdown. This is the game where the Bears trailed. They did not change their identity. It caught them in the game for a while until the mistakes really piled on and they lost 49-29. But Khalil Herbert is getting in that conversation with Tony Pollard in the same use. Guess who else is kind of like that now? He's Antonio Gibson. 14 carries, or 14 touches, I should say. Very involved in the passing game. 77 yards and a touchdown. Brian Robinson Jr. is pretty good, but he's not a good pass catcher. He's more of a power back. J.D. McKissick kind of being faded. And we really like the fact that Taylor Heineke throws to Gibson in the pass game. 2 games like that, Gibson gets in the end zone as a receiver. So he's turning into maybe a poor man's Kamara, a little bit of Pollard, change of pace there. That should be his role. He's a converted wide receiver. He was supposed to be the next CMC, and that I think they maybe oversold that and try to put him in the power running game. This is his role, folks, and he's been very effective there in PPR. So I love it for Antonio Gibson. He's found his niche. The Commanders are not going to move this guy anymore. He's integrated in their offense. They're 4-4. big reason why winning the last 2 weeks with Gibson playing a big receiving role here with Heineke. Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift did score a touchdown in his return, but Jamal Williams is the power back of choice near the goal line. He looked pretty good. 13 carries, 76 yards, 2 touchdowns. They came quite early against the Dolphins. Jamal, we want to think we can flex him in there, but it's just week to week. The volume is just so low. He's touchdown dependent. If he doesn't get those touchdowns, he's not getting receptions, and the numbers are pretty low even as a flex play. So something to keep in mind. Williams is okay during the bye weeks if you're desperate for someone to pop in for a touchdown, but doesn't have as much appeal in half point or full point PPR there if he's not scoring when we have other guys who are going to be involved in the passing game. All right, Caleb Huntley had an illness. He was battling it early in the week, but he played and he played well. He had 91 yards rushing there to lead the Falcons against the Panthers. Tyler Algier, however, was more impressive. He had the receiving touchdown, better scrimmage day. So I wouldn't read into too much Caleb Huntley. I think Tyler Algier is showing that he's a pretty versatile back here and their guy of choice versus like a Cordell Patterson or David Williams. Huntley is just part of their offense. They're going to give another back some significant touches. That's what we're seeing there. Another performance, this was underrated. This was on Sunday night. You had James Cook. He had solid 6 touches for 76 yards, good reception, long catch there. They need to get him a little bit more involved. You need a little bit more blowouts. If this was a little bit of bigger lead for the Bills late in the game versus a 10-point lead, I think you'd have seen more of James Cook leading up for Devin Singletary. But clearly he's a high-end handcuff here with Zach Moss after the bye, nowhere to be found. How about Kyle Pitts? 5 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown, one of his best performances ever overall. I mean, gets a touchdown, which doesn't happen. He gets the 80 yards. He was involved. What the Falcons needed was a good old-fashioned back-and-forth shootout. We got that against the Panthers of all teams on both sides going off, with DJ Moore also playing big time where there's that big touchdown that almost won them the game, did not as the meltdown happened. But Kyle Pitts back in our good graces here. The problem is Drake London right now. They're not going to get it to him too much. They have Olamide Zaccheaus and Demir Bird. They're taking these deep shots off the running game. But Kyle Pitts, I think everyone heard Arthur Smith, and they got him involved here. Now, how about Tyler Conklin at tight end? A big game for him. 6 catches, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns. I said this on Twitter. Kyle Duggar is the key there for the Patriots in covering tight ends. If he's not out there, that opens up a void. They're just not deep enough at safety to make that happen. So Conklin went back to working, and we had volume from Zach Wilson. That was big because he got Garrett Wilson to have 6 catches for 115. So you had the volume. Where the volume wasn't, Elijah Moore. It just was not there. I think they need to move this kid. They're just not using him enough, but there's no Corey Davis, so it meant a lot of Wilson and Conklin here with the high volume for Zach Wilson. How about Greg Dulcich here? The Broncos offense was kind of dull, no pun intended, until Dulcich was involved there in the second half. 4 catches for 87 yards. He helped them win the game there, come back and beat the Jaguars. So Dulcich is involved here, and it came at the expense of Cortland Sutton. We'll get into that more, but maybe work in the middle of the field more is what Russell Wilson needed, and you had Dulcich and Jerry Jeudy have good games against the Jaguars. All right, some other performances. Rondell Moore, wanted to write him off, but 7 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown here. So really, it's now the offense is going to DeAndre Hopkins dominating the targets, had that great one-handed TD catch. Zach Ertz scored a touchdown. He's the next guy. So it's basically the offense of 3 guys at this point: Hopkins, Moore, and Ertz, without Marquise Hollywood Brown in the lineup, and really not thrown at the backs. I mean, James Conner is hurt. They need to find somebody there. So Rondell Moore kind of fills in that old Chase Edmonds role, as well as filling in the old Greg Dortch / AJ Green / Christian Kirk role. So that's what you're getting here from Rondell Moore. So you can keep it up, a little bit touchdown dependent. We'd like to see that volume. 7 for 92 is nice. Terry McLaurin, he loves Taylor Heineke as well. He's had 2 big games there starting with Heineke. Heineke trusts him. He threw that great pass near the goal line that helped them win the game. The Heineke run the next play. 6 catches, 113. He's for real, feeling it. Curtis Samuel's still rather productive. What's also hurting or helping, I would say, the Heineke situation with McLaurin is the fact that Diami Brown is hurt with a growing injury. Jahan Dotson still nursing that hamstring. Logan Thomas not fully healthy. So a lot of the targets are being funneled there to Gibson, McLaurin, and Samuel, and that's really nice in fantasy football. How about Romeo Doubs? He had a really rough blanket game there for the Packers last week in a losing effort. Made a great touchdown catch. 4 for 62 and 1. Really helped that there was no Al Lazard with the shoulder injury. Randall Cobb down. Christian Watson went down after a big catch early in the game with a concussion. So that'd be Romeo Doubs pretty much in the past game. Sammy Watkins disappeared. So that trust is still there. I think it'll get better here for the Packers. They play the Buccaneers this week. Not a bad matchup there for passing ball. I mean, how about Toure, the other rookie, one catch, 37 yards, and a TD. He looked pretty good making that play. So maybe these rookies get unlocked a little bit more without Watson, and maybe Lazard on the shelf for a while as long as Cobb is out as well. All right. So there you have it. There's a look at the notable performance that stood out and the takeaways you need to know there for fantasy football here in week number 8, transitioning to week number 9. We will get into the disappointing performances. We'll break that down for you next on this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Get on your way to being your best self. Now, I have to tell you that therapy has been special for me. I've had it personally to help me problem solve. The benefits of I've just been feeling better and being able to handle my day, whether it's work or at home, and really is empowering. Really, we can have all these challenges in life where we're trying to juggle a lot of things, and really, I couldn't get through it without therapy and really just get on the right track with my life. So I can't recommend therapy enough here. And again, this show being sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online is so important, and everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp, that's BetterHelp, makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. It's all the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can really easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. There's no waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. BetterHelp is going to take care of you and find the right therapist fit for you with online therapy. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. It's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, it is time to continue the show here in a moment on Locked On Fantasy Football. Before we do that, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with local experts, insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, it's time to continue the show with the disappointing performances. Unfortunately, we have to talk about that. We had all the positive energy first, so let's assess these and take it from a level of understanding and caring and maybe what the heck is happening out there. The Raiders, collective bunch of disappointments here. What a terrible performance in New Orleans. They don't score a point. They got shut out by their former coach, Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen revenge game. His defense was playing poorly, but all of a sudden they got up for the Raiders, didn't they? Last time the Raiders were shut out in a game was 2014 when Dennis Allen was fired as their coach. It was Tony Sparano filling in. That's when they got shut out. So maybe Dennis Allen knew all this, but Derek Carr looks terrible. I know he had a back injury going to the game, but this guy has been massively disappointing in fantasy. I get it. Darren Waller's not out there, but 101 and an interception against the Saints defense without Marshawn Lattimore? Come on. This was terrible for the Raiders this week. So 101 and 1, not even a touchdown. That's the horrible part about Derek Carr. Like, get the passing volume at least. You're down big against the Saints. This was just awful. And then Devontae Adams playing through an illness. One catch for 3 yards. You couldn't scheme him open. Paulson Adebo, your second corner, is hurting with a knee injury. You don't have Lattimore. This should have been a dominant performance for Adams, but Derek Carr on the front end couldn't get the ball out to anyone. I don't know what happened. I mean, they schemed up pretty well. Dennis Allen maybe knowing the tendencies of Derek Carr. It's been a while. It's been 8 years since he coached Derek Carr, but maybe he just had all these notes how to frustrate him and confuse him with the combination of pressure and coverage. Whatever he did, it worked, and it was terrible for fantasy. So thank you, Dennis Allen, for getting Alvin Kamara involved. We're happy with that one. But on the other side, your defense really came to play, and hats off to you. But, man, 1 for 3 for Adams, and it wasn't even good for Hunter Renfrow. 1 catch for 6 yards. So he actually outpointed Adams without Darren Waller. The only player that showed up was Foster Moreau. It was a homecoming game there without Waller. He was decent. The Saints are actually pretty good against the tight end. Of all the people, he was their leading receiver. So disappointing there, but we're not done with the Raiders. Josh Jacobs, 12 carries, 46 yards. What the heck? That is terrible from Jacobs. And again, I had a friend of mine in a Chow League. I mean, yeah, based on the data, you would have said maybe I'm going to keep starting Josh Jacobs at the big game last week with the 3 touchdowns. I'm going to put him in there after the Texans' performance versus Alvin Kamara. Oops, that didn't work out at all in this one. So Josh Jacobs, the problem is we didn't expect them to get this far behind against the Saints. We thought the game script might be a little bit different, but still, Josh Jacobs have been so good. This Raiders run blocking has been excellent, but guess what? The Saints fronts really helped them win this game for sure against the Raiders. No doubt about it, offensive and defensive line. So horrible performance of the Raiders. I don't know where we go from here. I don't know when Waller's going to come back. I don't know what Josh McDaniels is doing, but to waste that great performance or great matchup, I should say, not a great performance at all, but a lousy performance in a great matchup, inexcusable here for the Silver and Blank, we're going to call them after this game. All right, that's out of my system. The Raiders. The Raiders. All right, let's go to another disappointment in fantasy. This is your number 1 overall pick, Jonathan Taylor. What the heck is going on, Jonathan Taylor? Fully healthy from the ankle injury, but the volume has just disappeared. He looks good early in games. He's running well, but then the game script just goes haywire. In this case, it was just a low-scoring game against the Commanders. They are good up in the middle. Don't forget, Deron Payne and their guys, Jonathan Allen, in the middle are pretty good against the run. You're in a matchup where you pass more, but 16 carries, 76 yards. The biggest bummer was losing the fumble. I think the Colts were going in to score in that drive, and he loses the fumble. So I don't know. He just seems out of sorts with the ankle injury. This maybe being a little bit rusty. Just shocking how big of a bust Jonathan Taylor's on the verge of being, especially when you see what McCaffrey's doing and the good fortune he's had being traded to the 49ers. Another big first-round bust, no doubt about it. Najee Harris, he hasn't even had one really good game here. 14 touches, 58 yards, got a few more catches to help you PPR leagues, but there's no doubt that Jalen Warren, the undrafted rookie, looks better there. I don't know. Harris just looks slow. He looks tentative as a runner. Maybe he's still worrying about that steel plate in his foot. I don't know what's up here, but terrible here with Najee Harris. I wonder if they're going to give Jalen Warren more run with Kenny Pickett. That would just kill Najee Harris's value. So Jalen Warren needs to be rostered in all leagues at this point, the way that Harris is going. And with the Colts, I mean, I think you have to roster Nyheim Hines. He even had the touchdown there from Taylor. So they're going to have to make a change if it's not working. And again, with these questionable quarterback transitions where we had Matt Ryan to Sam Ellinger, we had Mitchell Trubisky to Kenny Pickett. That's hurting these quarterbacks on top of underachieving or running backs, as well as underachieving offensive line play in both cases. All right, how about the Jets backfield? I said buyer beware on Michael Carter and James Robinson. I didn't know about the usage. It was really disappointing. The Patriots keyed in on these guys, so that's why the Jets had to put the ball in the air. Without Breece Hall, it's easier to take out Carter and Robinson, especially when you have your 2 key offensive linemen, Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera talking around the right side. So really big loss there on the offensive line for the run blocking. So Carter and Robinson 5 touches, 17 yards, no catches there. He had 11 for 61 for Carter, just not getting it done here. So 2 of the bigger disappointments, that backfield altogether did not add up to one Breece Hall against the Patriots. Now, Raheem Mostert against the Lions, I don't know what happened. Mostert was running well early, and the game script was negative, but then the Dolphins did get up. It took them so much energy with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to get up front that they became a passing team. They went back to that formula against the Ravens. So Mostert was doing well, but then the negative game script really hurt Mostert. If they had kind of come out firing, got the big lead instead, then you'd have seen a lot better with Mostert. So that's what happened here, 17 for 69. Damian Harris is unusable. He had 52 yards on 13 touches here. Oof. It is clearly Ramondre Stevenson all the way. The passing game, the running game, the power game, red zone, all that. So Damian Harris's value, he's pretty much just a handcuff right now to Ramondre Stevenson. Hopefully you're able to draft both of those guys in a lot of leagues here. So really disappointing there. We talked about Antonio Gibson with his big game. Brian Robinson, 8 carries, 20 yards. Just not getting it done. He's not going to get involved in the pass game, folks. So there's a ugly game script, and we know the Colts run defense got a lot better with Shaquille Leonard out there. because he's a big difference maker. And we saw that definitely with that front, and Robinson in the power running game just disappeared here for the Colts. And what do you do with the Rams running backs? I mean, Cam Akers, we'll see if he gets traded, see if he gets back in the good graces of the team with the personal stuff with Sean McVay. Darrell Henderson wasn't even the leader. It was Ronnie Rivers. Ronnie Rivers sounds like a guy from a New Edition, a lost member of New Edition. Ronnie Rivers or Belbid DeVoe, somebody like that from the 80s. But Ronnie Rivers was the leading toucher and producer here for the Rams backfield. I think they're waiting for Kyren Williams. He wasn't active in this game, so if you can stash Kyren Williams, go do it. The Rams need to get a running back and a running game stat. Henderson not cutting it. Akers could be on his way out. Kyren Williams, hopefully we'll see some run, or it could be Akers himself. Who knows? Rams in the running game just not giving you anything right now. All right, well, we'll get into a few wide receivers as well that were big disappointments. Courtland Sutton, what happened to this? You had great chemistry with Russell Wilson. All of a sudden, it pivots to Jerry Jeudy, Greg Dulcich. Dulcich has come in and kind of cut into Sutton here. So we thought, okay, no Brett Rippon, so that means Russell Wilson's going to connect with his boy Sutton. No, only one catch for 13 yards against the Jaguars. They actually have a very good corner, even though Shaquille Griffin didn't play. Tyson Campbell has been on the borderline shutdown line here this season. So they're playing a little bit, protecting against a big play threat, trying to get the ball out quickly. So Sutton, again, really bad this week. Gabe Davis was disappointing. I get it. The Packers actually put Jair Alexander on him at time. There's the whole thing with Alexander and Stephon Diggs in the tunnel. Diggs got the touchdown. The Bills kind of grinded this game out here against the Packers. So not that high passing volume. You also had 2 interceptions thrown on drive killers by Josh Allen. So more scoring opportunities down there. So Gabe Davis didn't need the volume. They kind of grinded this game away against the Packers. So 2 for 35, they'll bounce back. How about the Steelers wide receivers? Wow. I mean, 5 for 35 for Deontay Johnson. That's kind of been the norm in tough matchups with Kenny Pickett. But how about George Pickens? 0 points here for Pickens. We knew this matchup was hard with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Didn't recommend either as a play, but to just disappear if you needed either to put up something as a wide receiver 3, you got something out of Deontay in PPR, but George Pickens goes blank here. And another rookie that we're high on and we kind of like, but we want to be buyer beware with Daniel Jones, a slow fall in pass game. Wan'Dale Robinson, only 3 targets, 2 catches for 15 yards against the Seahawks. Now, that is tough because the Seahawks are weak in the slot, but they're just not throwing the ball enough. There was a lot of Darius Slayton, who Daniel Jones knows very well from his rookie season. Saquon Barkley, pretty much it's that. And if they don't have Daniel Bellinger, a little bit Chris Myrick at tight end. They had Richie James play, but he had a couple fumbles before he had to be ruled out with a concussion. So too many mouths being spread out in a low-volume passing offense. Not good for Wan'Dale Robinson here. So hopefully he'll get better. But this is a weapon that's untapped, and I think you may have to wait without Kadarius Toney in the mix to 2023 when Brian Dable and Mike Kafka, when you have full season to know what to do with Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he'll be a good value. Better play here in fantasy football next year here rather than rushing him and forcing him into something he can't do in 2022. All right, so we'll get in our final segment with our injury reports here that you need to know for the week. We'll do that. I had a big milestone this year with my 10th wedding anniversary, and really have to find something special to commemorate that event. And you might have a milestone to celebrate, or maybe you're about to pop the question. Well, Blue Nile is here to help to make your milestone moment more memorable. If you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, want to let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of individually graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. The easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then help you handcraft your perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. Looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but still having trouble choosing? Blue Nile's jewelry experts on hand 24/7. Available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Stop stress-free with Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's Blue Nile, BlueNile.com. Code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON. All right, time to close the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Looking at the injury updates you need to know coming out of the games on Sunday. Jonathan Taylor had an ankle injury. He re-aggravated there, or aggravated. You can't re-aggravate, you can only aggravate. And it aggravated us that he was out of the game for a little while, questionable return, came back, didn't do anything except lose a fumble, and ran for a few more yards against the Commanders. So, yeah, really tough with Jonathan Taylor. Mark Ingram, a knee injury. So notable there that Alvin Kamara was having a big game. Ingram, something to watch out for. So no real quarterbacks of note. So only the running backs there. Now, not a lot at wide receiver here. We're tracking most Cooper Kupp with an ankle injury. There it was late. Sean McVay is kicking himself. He kept saying that, admitting that I shouldn't have had Cooper Kupp in the game when we're losing big time and all that. Should have just run the ball. So McVay, however, was optimistic that it's not a serious injury. We're going to have to see. They've already had their bye week last week, of course, so we're going to see if Cooper Kupp can suit up against the Buccaneers, the team he lit up in the playoffs to help the Rams win the Super Bowl last year. Christian Watson, concussion, we said Romeo Doubs could see a little bit even a bigger role here if Watson misses time with the concussion. So tough break for Watson. He might have had a big game there and got that play early against the Bills. Adam Thielen had a knee bruise. He was out briefly there, was on the ground for a bit against the Cardinals, but should be good to go for this game going forward. So, again, no worries too much with Adam Thielen. Devontae Parker, knee injury, who knows? Devontae Parker's had a history of that. He's inconsistent, flashing the offense. Anyway, we talked about Richie James having a concussion there for the Giants, so maybe some opportunities will open up for Wan'Dale Robinson at some point. So not too much on the injury front there. Tight end, the notable one was Tyler Higbee, had a neck injury. So I didn't like Higbee in that matchup against the 49ers, especially, again, with Allen Robinson and Ben Skowronek and others getting a little bit more run there, and it didn't come to fruition here with the injury for the neck here for Higbee. Irv Smith, I did like quite a bit against the Cardinals matchup. We know what Irv Smith could have done in the game because Johnny Munt did score a touchdown against the Cardinals. So the Cardinals giving up easy touchdowns there. Irv Smith Jr. probably catches that if he's in the game. They're healthy, but then ankle injury there with Irv Smith. So just can't catch a break staying healthy coming off the knee injury for last year. For the Vikings, notable there how that affects them. Just like we saw Allen Robinson be more involved there in general for the Rams. You're going to get more KJ Osborne. They do use more 11 personnel anyway. So if Smith is hurting, that's going to keep Osborne involved there with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So Jefferson had a big game early. It looked like he was going to roll, but then Osborne got the TD. Thielen was pretty decent in the game. So more 11 personnel. I think that's what the Vikings are pretty much going to do there. And Irv Smith's not a bad blocker, but they have the ability to get Dalvin Cook rolling. He's been really looking good in the power running game now that he's settled in and really knows that scheme. There are really no other notable injuries. Devondre Campbell, I think the Packers linebacker, something to track here because he is an IDP guy with his tackles, but also could be a big loss for the running game going forward. So the Packers really need to kind of fix some more things there this week. It's a tough out there. So again, Campbell, we'll see. They had Quay Walker ejected from the game, but Campbell is somebody that they really need. He was awesome last year in coverage and against the run, and that's why they brought him back in a nice contract here in 2022. So that was the most notable defensive injury there. So Packers can't catch a break with guys staying healthy. So there you have it. There's a breakdown here of the injuries you need to know. We were comprehensive about the important takeaways there from the big performances, the disappointing performances. That's good because then we can put the clamps on week number 8. We have the Bengals and Browns game tonight, so one more game to watch there. So keep in mind, Jamar Chase not playing tonight, so David Njoku also out. So we'll see what we get. If you need anything from Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, and the principals on the Browns and Bengals, good luck for that. If those are important to your fantasy football matchups tonight, we will turn to our waiver wire here in week number 9 on Tuesday's show. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen. For next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and just like the Locked On Fantasy Football, wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, for this Monday show, happy Halloween, safe trick-or-treating out there, and we'll catch you there Monday. And catch you there Tuesday after trick-or-treating for hopefully some treats on the waiver wire.